Greetings and welcome back to the Old Ways Rising Farm YouTube channel, where today we're doing a simple little teaching video on how to make your own dye to turn leather a beautiful, rich jet black. This is very, very simple. The dye is made from rusty metal and common household ingredients that I can almost guarantee you already have in your kitchen. So it's virtually free. And after watching this video, you'll never need to buy black leather dye again. So, this tip is a little bit of information that I gleaned from some bookbinding resources. Now, one of the projects I've been working on for the last few years is going through as just reams and reams and reams and reams and reams of historical observations, resources, instruction manuals, etc., pulling out the most useful stuff and re-indexing it and archiving it on our Patreon page. This is an unsponsored channel, and we are so grateful for all of our patrons over there on Patreon. And if you would like to join and get access to all the sorts of information that we're using to learn what we need to learn to do cool projects like this, I would love for you to join. The resources are available just as a for-sale download, but anybody who joins the Patreon at any membership level, any of the paid membership levels, gets full unlimited access to that information for as long as you're a member. And the repository keeps growing. So if you're looking for this particular tip, it's not in the leatherworking compilation, it's in the bookbinding materials that are available on the Patreon. And a lot of this was, those bookbinding resources, the old bookbinding resources, have a lot of information on coloring leather because of the importance of leather in bookbinding. And I was going to say something about them. Some of them have been abandoned and replaced with aniline dye for good reason. Like if you read those old sources, the yellows are strong acids that will eat your fingers off and you shouldn't use unless you're very well trained in chemistry and have proper PPE. Or things like picric acid, which has a tendency to, what's a YouTube authorized term? Undergo energetic disassembly if they dry, and then you lose your whole hand all at once. So, don't use those. We have moved on from nitric acid and picric acid as dyes for leather for good reason. If you try to buy those things, you're going to be on a list you don't want to be on, so leave them alone. However, some of these were forgotten for silly reasons, like they were just forgotten, when everything in this jar, I could almost guarantee, you already have in your kitchen. So, I hope that you'll be, interested in joining and availing yourself of some of those resources. But either way, come along and I'll show you how to make this particular very easy, very cheap, very safe black leather dye. Now, making our leather blackening solution couldn't be simpler. The first thing we need is some rusty bits of junk metal. Now, if you're watching this channel, I have faith in you and your ability to find some little bits of rusty junk. It's probably harder to not find it than to find it. So we're going to put our rusty junk in our jar. Nothing particular about the jar. If you have some old cast iron that's rusty and needs cleaned, you could even use this to clean it and then save the rust water. Now the next thing is just some common white vinegar. Again, nothing fancy. And we're just going to cover up our pieces. And that's it. Now, what's going to happen is that the acidity is going to allow the metal ions to dissolve easier, and they're going to react with the vinegar to produce iron acetate. And iron acetate is already a fairly soluble form of iron. So iron oxide, which is what the rust is, and iron hydroxide, which is also common in rust, is a mixture of those two things, do not dissolve at neutral pH in water. But they dissolve a little bit at high acidity, and iron acetate dissolves a lot at any pH, well, any non-alkali pH, but a whole lot at acidic pH. So we're taking the surface rust off of these, and we're going to turn it into a form which is able to dissolve easily. And I can already see there's a bunch of little bubbles coming off from it, which means it's working. So we're going to let that sit, work overnight, and then tomorrow we'll look at what happens when we stick a paintbrush in there and paint it on a leather scrap. Here we go. It's been overnight, and you can see, hopefully at least a little bit, that the liquid inside of this jar is now sort of a yellow-red color. That's the iron dissolving in the vinegar. So let's paint this on. We'll go right to the experiment. So I have two samples of leather here. The bottom one, the smaller piece here, is a little bit of smoke tanned, brain tanned buckskin. And this is a bit of veg tan cowhide. Okay? So let's paint a bit of our iron oxide mixture. First we will paint it on the buckskin. Okay, I'm just going to do half of it here. And now let's paint it on the veg tan cowhide. And look what a difference you see. It takes a minute to fully develop. But you can see that nice dark black color coming in.
That's neat.
It is neat, right? Let's coat this up good.
Chemistry is so fun.
It is. So, let's think about the chemistry of this. Look at how dark that's already gotten, and consider that the buckskin is still completely pale. So what's going on here? Well, it's certainly not. It's obviously a chemical reaction, right? I'm taking a pale liquid, putting it onto a pale surface, and we're getting a jet black color. So we are certainly meeting the criteria for saying it's a chemical reaction between the two components. So what is the chemical reaction? Well, this is what's called a chelation complex between tannic acid and the iron ions, and it turns absolutely jet black. So, oh, beloved, could you get me one of the bog oak knife handles? Mm-hmm. So, forgot to grab that over before we started filming. So, this shows up in a couple of places. One, it is a traditional technique amongst trappers to take their traps, the rusty traps, soak them in tannic acid, and it turns them black. Same chemistry. Second, if you've ever heard of bog oak, okay, now this is artificial bog oak that I made, and I have a video here showing how I make this. I'll make sure that's in the end screen. But this is, wood that has soaked in a natural bog for a long time. The acidity of the bog will liberate iron from the soil. And then as it soaks in and reacts with tannic acid in the oak or other high tannin woods, it turns them jet black. This is artificial. This was soaked for 3 years in that liquid right there. Okay? And it turns the oak jet black. This is also the oak gall ink. If you've ever heard of that, it's the old-fashioned ink that was used in a lot of legal documents, including like the founding documents of the United States, is ground up oak gall mixed with iron filings. And it turns that color and is used for ink. This is also the black pigment in Japanese black lacquer ware. The lacquer resin, the urushiol lacquer resin from the lacquer tree, has tannic acid in it. So when they want to color that, when they want the black lacquer to be totally black and not a transparent, they mix it with ground red iron oxide. And it turns the lacquer absolutely completely black. But why are we different in the two kinds of leather? Well, the veg tan was tanned with tannic acid. So when you're getting a vegetable tanned leather, it's pre-mordanted with tannic acid. So when I put the iron on, it's reacting with the tanning chemicals And you can see here in this little bit of buckskin, we don't have any substantial quantity of tannic acid in there. Okay, there's a little bit of oxidation at the surface here. Could be contamination with something. Could have been a little bit of rust that got on the surface, or just contamination. I do a lot with this stuff that involves tannic acid. There could be some tannic acid contamination there on the surface. But to prove that it's tannic acid, I'm going to take some of my walnut hull dye. Okay. And if I paint this on, you'll see that over here, it's dyeing the brown color we would expect from walnut hull dye. But over here, where now I pre-morded that section of leather with iron, and then add the tannic acid as a second step, it's turning black instead of the brown of the walnut dye. Okay, so that's the tannic acid in these walnut hulls that is doing that. So we have a cute little little experiment, little demonstration. So this is the traditional black of like 17 and 1800s black leatherware. This is how they did it. So if you're making truly authentic goods and you want to reproduce that, this is how you do it. It's really nice. It's really simple. It's virtually free. You now never need to get you never need to buy a black leather dye ever again, right? This will also dye cloth, but you have to do the two-step process. Either you can pre-mord it in iron and then treat it with a tannic acid source, or pre-mord it with tannic acid and then treat it with an iron source. Okay? Same with any form of leather that is not veg tan leather. So alum tan leather will not turn black. Chrome tan leather will not turn black unless you take both parts of the recipe and put them on, just as you would with cloth. But this is a very traditional way to dye materials a nice black color. So, particularly military equipment, right? Civil War era military equipment was always black leather. That's because they wanted it to all look uniform, and this was the cheapest way to do it. So black was the cheapest color to make that would make everybody's gear look identical. Okay? So, I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that you'll go check out all of the materials that I mentioned at the beginning of the video on our Patreon, and most of all, I hope that you'll join us here next time at Old Ways Rising Farm.